husband overheard me talking about my affair during my sleep and acted like nothing happened, but then, hey Reddit, I really need to get this off my chest as something incredibly bizarre and unexpected happened to me recently, and I really don't know how to process it. It's made worse by the fact that it was all my fault. I caused the whole thing. My husband heard me talking about my affair partner in my sleep and pretended as if he didn't know, just so he could get revenge on me. I apologize in advance if this might sound a bit disorganized or a bit too long, as I'm still trying to make sense of my thoughts, and I'm also using this post as a place to express my feelings. For a bit of context, my name is Anita and my husband's name is Ken. We've been together for about 8 years, married for about 2. We don't have any kids as we were planning on having some a few more years into our marriage. I am 30 years old and my husband is 29 and we met in college. Things were pretty great between us. We had good jobs right out of college because my husband's dad owned a successful company. It was a fantastic start to our careers and we were both grateful for the opportunities. My husband's love language was acts of service and he excelled at it. He took on about 70% of the household chores despite his busy schedule and still contributed around 60% of the bills. He was always helpful and he made sure everything around the house ran smoothly. What made our relationship even more special was how romantic and thoughtful my husband was. He planned surprise date nights, romantic dinner dates, movie nights at home, and many other thoughtful gestures. He always took the initiative in our relationship and he always made me feel cherished and loved. However, we did have our differences, especially when it came to finances. My husband was a saver and believed in making investments and taking calculated risks. On the other hand, I was more of a spender. I believed in enjoying life in the moment and not worrying too much about the future. This clash of perspectives led to a disagreement about having a joint account. I wanted one because I saw it as a symbol of unity in our marriage, but my husband was very hesitant. He was concerned that I would spend recklessly, depleting our savings. After some discussions and disagreements, I eventually relented and decided to respect my husband's concerns and decisions regarding our finances. Despite this difference, our relationship was strong, and we worked well together in most aspects of our lives. Our sex life was another area where we faced ongoing challenges, at least from my perspective. It's not that it was bad. In fact, it was quite good. However, it didn't match up to my desires and expectations. In simpler terms, it just didn't always hit the spot for me. One major issue was our differing libidos. I had a much higher sex drive than my husband. This often meant that when I was in the mood, he wasn't, and vice versa. When he did try to engage despite not being fully into it, it wasn't as fulfilling for me. He was so careful and gentle that it didn't quite scratch the itch, if you know what I mean. Another aspect was the style of intimacy. Like I think I've mentioned before, my husband was gentle, soft, and very considerate during sex. Don't get me wrong, that's sweet and all, but it left me feeling a bit unsatisfied at times as it didn't align with what I desired. I preferred a more passionate and rough approach, and that was something my husband was very hesitant about. He was always cautious and always concerned about causing any discomfort or harm. It was like we were speaking different languages in the bedroom, and of course it led to some frustrations and tensions between us. Despite those bumps in the road, our relationship was solid. We had a lot of good moments together, and we enjoyed each other's company and supported each other through thick and thin. Ken was my rock. He was always there when I needed him, and I did my best to be there for him too. We shared a lot of interests and hobbies like hiking on weekends, trying out new restaurants, and even binge watching our favorite TV shows. These moments created a very strong bond between us, and I cherished them deeply. Ken's dedication to our relationship was admirable. He never hesitated to go the extra mile to make me happy, whether it was planning surprise date nights, cooking my favorite meals, or simply being a listening ear after a long day at work. His love for me was undeniable, and despite our differences, he made it work. He was a source of joy and comfort in my life. Then Vince came into the mix. He was the latest addition to the company, and as Vince settled into his role at the company, we started talking more often. He had this way of asking questions that didn't bug me, unlike some others who could be a bit pushy. Vince was just genuinely curious and friendly, and that made it easy to chat with him. Slowly, I found myself liking Vince not just as a colleague, but as a friend. He was always so eager to learn and improve, which I found really cool. Our chats started feeling more personal, and I enjoyed spending time with him. There was definitely a connection between us, something that went beyond work banter. We had things in common and got along well, but I knew I had to be careful. I loved my husband and didn't want to mess things up. As I got closer to Vince, I realized how much I was lonely and had craved a deep connection. Sure, I had work buddies, but Vince was different. He became someone I could truly open up to. It felt like we clicked instantly, like we'd been pals forever, even though we'd only known each other a short while. The thing is, I couldn't ignore the spark I felt for Vince. It started innocently enough, just a harmless crush. But as we hung out more, both at work and in our chats outside of work, that crush turned into something stronger. I found myself eagerly waiting for his messages, constantly checking my phone in hopes of hearing from him. Ken, my husband, noticed the change. He didn't say much, just gave me these curious and puzzled looks when I'd grab my phone eagerly. I could tell he was puzzled by the sudden shift in my focus. And when he found out I changed my phone password, even though he didn't say it outright, I could sense his worry. But in my mind, it was just a friendship, nothing more. I didn't want to risk what I had with Vince, that is my friendship with him, over a silly crush. As more time went on, Vince and I started hanging out more often outside of work. It began with simple things like grabbing lunch together or meeting up for a coffee after work. These outings gradually became a regular occurrence, and I found myself enjoying his company more and more. Our conversations weren't just about work anymore. We flirted, got into personal topics, shared our thoughts on life, relationships, and everything in between. Vince was a great listener, and I felt comfortable opening up to him in ways I hadn't with anyone else. Our friendship felt refreshing, like a breath of fresh air amidst the routine of daily life. I appreciated having someone outside of my marriage to connect with on a deeper level. Vince brought a sense of excitement and companionship that I had been missing. Despite our growing closeness, I still somehow convinced myself that our relationship was purely platonic. I ignored the subtle hints and gestures that hinted at something more, and chose to see them as friendly interactions. As I grew closer to Vince, I naturally drifted apart from my husband. It wasn't something I planned, it just happened because of how much I enjoyed spending time with Vince. Before Vince, my husband was my main focus. He wasn't just my partner, he was my best friend too. But as Vince became more and more important to me, my attention shifted. Suddenly, my husband wasn't the only person I thought about all the time. I felt torn between staying loyal to my husband and nurturing my new friendship with Vince. I wanted to make things work with my husband, but I also didn't want to lose Vince, who had become such a significant part of my life. This inner conflict led to a noticeable distance between my husband and me. Our convos became routine, and it lacked the excitement and connection I felt with Vince. As a result of that, I found myself enjoying my conversations with Vince more and always eagerly looking forward to moments with Vince. I cherished our talks and shared experiences. Deep down, I knew my feelings for Vince were growing stronger every day. It became increasingly challenging to juggle my emotions and responsibilities, especially as my bond with Vince deepened. As I hung out more with Vince, we clicked even better, and I naturally continued to pull away from my husband. Vince had this infectious energy that just lit up every room he entered. Being around him felt like a breath of fresh air compared to the routine of my marriage. He was so full of life and always eager to try new things, which I found really exciting. One of the things that drew me to Vince was his youthful spirit. He was adventurous and always up for a good time, unlike my husband, who was more settled and focused on stability. Vince brought this thrill and spontaneity into my life that I hadn't experienced in a while. Our hangouts became more frequent, and eventually we started chilling at Vince's place. It was a cozy little spot, and since he lived solo and wasn't tied down romantically, it was just us most of the time. Being in that relaxed setting allowed our friendship to deepen into something more meaningful. I found myself opening up to Vince in ways I hadn't with anyone else. We shared personal stories, dreams, and goals. There was this understanding and connection between us that felt incredibly real. But as my bond with Vince grew stronger, I couldn't shake off the growing distance between my husband and me. Our talks became strained, and I couldn't help but compare the excitement and passion I felt with Vince against the comfortable but somewhat dull routine of my marriage. Well, as you guys might have already guessed, I eventually found myself in a situation I never thought I'd be in. It all started innocently enough. We were watching movies at Vince's place. We had this routine of watching our favorite films, chatting, and just enjoying each other's company. But that day, something shifted. We were lounging on the couch, the movie was playing in the background, when I leaned in and kissed him. It was impulsive, but I was just so attracted to Vince. Vince was obviously shocked and taken aback at first, but he didn't pull away. Instead, he responded, and that's when everything changed. The kisses turned into something more. We then headed to the bedroom, and before I knew it, I had crossed a line that I never thought I would. Of course, I immediately felt guilty after that, but I also felt excited and fulfilled. I had enjoyed it so much. It was like I had unlocked a part of myself that had been dormant for so long. The sex with Vince was different from anything I had experienced with my husband. It was rough, intense, and it fulfilled a craving I didn't even realize I had. I have always yearned for that spark, that wild connection that made my heart race and my senses come alive. And with Vince, I found it. I knew I was betraying my husband. I knew I was breaking the vows we had made to each other. But in those moments, it was hard to think about anything else but the raw desire and satisfaction I was experiencing. Despite the guilt, I couldn't deny that I felt alive in a way I hadn't in a long time. Vince awakened something in me, something wild and untamed, something I had buried deep inside. That was how I got caught up in this wild affair with Vince, and it felt like I was hooked on something addictive. The sex were filled with this crazy, intense passion that I couldn't resist. It was like stepping into a whole new world where my usual worries and responsibilities melted away, and all that mattered was the rush of being with him. I'd make up excuses to my husband, saying I needed to stay late at work, just so I could sneak off and be with Vince. Even though deep down I knew it was all wrong. But in those moments with Vince, none of that seemed to matter. I wrestled with guilt every time I saw my husband's face, knowing I was betraying him. But the pull of the affair was too strong to resist. As my affair with Vince went on, it got harder for my husband to catch on. He trusted me a lot and never snooped through my phone or checked up on me, even when I slipped up and left messages unerased. It was like I had a free pass to do as I pleased. Vince and I were pros at playing it cool at work. We kept our professional masks on so well that no one suspected a thing. If you saw us at work, you'd never guess we were secretly involved. Vince's behavior took a nosedive into controlling territory. He became possessive and controlling. He started acting like he owned me, forgetting our agreement to keep things discreet at work. It got annoying and kind of scary. We had one golden rule, which was to avoid anything that could raise suspicion or expose us in our professional environment. But Vince disregarded this rule entirely. He began dictating what I should wear, going as far as to command me not to wear my wedding ring. His demands were becoming invasive and disrespectful, especially considering that I was his senior at work. Before our affair, Vince had been friendly and informal, which was fine since we were friends. However, after our affair started, his behavior became more rude and disrespectful. What really got under my skin was his disrespect toward my husband. He'd make snide remarks, implying my husband couldn't satisfy me, which is why I was with him. It was hurtful and completely out of line. Vince was not only messing with professional boundaries, but also disrespecting me and my marriage. I started thinking about dumping Vince. He was acting worse and worse, and I didn't want him dragging me down with him. We had a good thing going for a while, but now it was turning sour. However, fate had other plans for me, and I got caught before I could end things with Vince. And let me tell you, it was in the worst way possible, talking in my sleep. With all the stress Vince was causing me, I started sleep talking again. It's something I used to do more when I was younger. This time, though, I must have let slip about my affair. My husband overheard it all. Instead of calling me out right then and there, he snooped through my phone and confirmed his suspicions. It was a humiliating way to get caught, and I feel like it was karma was hitting me hard for my actions. My husband then suggested we go on a little trip for the weekend. I wasn't thrilled about that, and I was reluctant because it means I wouldn't be able to see Vince for that weekend. So at first I said no, but my husband insisted on the trip. He promised it would be short, just a weekend getaway. So reluctantly, I agreed. My husband said he would rent us an Airbnb, and that sounded like a welcome change. It had been ages since my husband and I did something just for us. So despite the guilt, I looked forward to spending quality time with him. Part of me was also a bit relieved, as this gave me a break from Vince's possessiveness. He'd been getting on my nerves, and I needed space from his demands. I told Vince about the trip, and of course he wasn't happy. But with the plans already made, there wasn't much he could do. The weekend rolled by and we headed out. After arriving at the Airbnb, the first day of our trip was rather uneventful. We simply wandered around, taking in the sights and exploring the area. It felt strange being away from home, but despite that, I tried to enjoy the change of scenery and the chance to spend some quality time with my husband, even if I felt a bit uneasy. That evening, we had a quiet dinner at a local restaurant. The atmosphere was pleasant, and my husband seemed determined to make the most of our time together. He was being attentive and affectionate, which only made me feel more guilty about my affair with Vince. It was like a constant shadow hanging over me, reminding me of the betrayal I was committing. As the night wore on, we returned to our Airbnb. My husband suggested watching a movie together, something we used to do often before things started falling apart between us. It felt like he was trying to recapture the closeness we once had, and it made me feel a mixture of nostalgia and sadness. We cuddled on the couch, but my mind kept wandering to Vince and the excitement I felt when I was with him. The next day, we planned to do some sightseeing and visit a nearby beach. My husband was eager to make the most of our time away, and I tried to push aside my guilt and be present in the moment. However, every time my phone buzzed with a message, I couldn't help but wonder if it was from Vince. The thought made me anxious and distracted throughout the day, even as we enjoyed the activities my husband had planned. By the time evening rolled around, I was exhausted both physically and emotionally. The weight of my actions felt heavier than ever. I felt so guilty and wanted to come clean. I regretted everything. I woke up on Monday morning expecting to find my husband still there, but the Airbnb was eerily empty. Initially, I tried to stay calm, thinking maybe he had gone out for a quick errand. I called him several times, but each attempt went unanswered. As minutes ticked by, my anxiety grew. I decided to pack our bags since we were leaving that morning. I assumed he'd be back soon, but as I gathered our things, I realized his belongings were missing. Panic started to set in as I dialed his number repeatedly. I was desperate for an explanation. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he answered. My relief was short-lived as he unleashed his fury. He was calm but firm, telling me he had left and that I should find my own way back home. Of course, I was confused, so I asked him why he would do something like that. He then accused me of being ungrateful and dishonest, saying that our time at the Airbnb was his way of giving me a chance to confess. He made it clear he knew what I had been doing with Vince. He informed me that my belongings had been packed and sent to my parents' house. There was no room for negotiation or reconciliation. He told me to head straight to my parents' place, not to our home. Then the call ended abruptly before I could even defend myself. I hailed an Uber to get to my parents' place because I knew my husband wasn't messing around. When I arrived, it was like a reality check smacked me in the face. My parents were fuming. They asked why I'd messed things up with my husband like that. They pointed to the pile of my stuff that his friends had dumped there. Their disappointment cut deep, but I was too drained to argue or explain. It feels like I'm living in some crazy drama and I just want it all to stop. I know I can't lean on my parents forever. They made it clear I had to sort things out with my husband. I feel utterly lost. I'm reaching out for any tips or advice on how to patch up this mess. Any real help or insights would mean the world right now. Update. Hey Reddit, it's me again, the one you've labeled as the cheater. I came here seeking some advice and support, but instead I've been met with a lot of insults and disrespect. Thanks for nothing, Reddit. To clear up some common misconceptions, many of you have accused me of talking about Vince like I'm in love with him. That couldn't be further from the truth. I don't love Vince. I love my husband, and all I want is to mend things with him. Vince was just a passionate fling that happened. Yes, I enjoyed it, but love? That's a stretch. I understand that what I did was wrong, and I'm not trying to justify it. But the constant name-calling and insults are not helpful. If you don't have anything constructive to say, please refrain from commenting. Let's keep this space respectful and focused on finding solutions, not tearing each other down. Update. Hey Reddit, I wish I could bring you some positive news, but unfortunately there's no happy ending yet. Many of you are saying I should give up, that my husband won't forgive me, but I believe he will. It's just a matter of time. To address some questions, we are in touch, although our communication is minimal. He shared a few details with me because I've been messaging and pleading with him. I didn't go to work today because I'm unsure if I still have a job. Given his position in the company, I might be facing termination, but I haven't received any confirmation yet. I haven't responded to his message yet, and I'm not sure if he's aware of everything that's going on. My husband is adamant about wanting a divorce, and he's not answering questions about my job status or if Vince is still around. It's a very challenging and uncertain time, and I'm trying to navigate through it the best I can. Update. Hey Reddit, it's me again, the cheater. I know I'll probably face a lot of criticism for what I did, but I wanted to share an update. I decided to go back to work today since I hadn't heard anything official. Upon arriving, I realized that it was indeed my last day at the company. That explains why Vince stopped texting me. He was terminated too. I never responded to his last message during our vacation, and he sent a few more afterward. After that, the messages stopped, so I guess he's come to terms with why I didn't reply. On top of that, I was terminated when I arrived, but I'll receive 2 weeks' pay, which isn't much but will help for a bit. I attempted to talk to my husband, but he wasn't very receptive. He kept telling me to stop acting foolishly and that we're definitely heading for a divorce. He urged me to take a moment to think, suggesting that if I had done so earlier, I wouldn't be in this situation. He asked if I would forgive him if he cheated, to which I honestly said no. Then he questioned why I expected forgiveness for my actions. Eventually, he escorted me out, and although I resisted a bit, I made sure to tidy up my workspace and lack my stuff before leaving. So it's official, we're getting divorced. I know many of you may want to criticize me, but that's okay. At least I have 2 weeks' pay to help me through this rough time. Update. Hey Reddit, it's me again, the cheater. I know many of you were waiting for an update on when the divorce would be official, so here it is. You can go ahead and celebrate with my husband. The divorce is done. It's been a tough few months and I've been avoiding posting this update, but I felt I owed it to those who were kind to me despite my mistakes. The divorce process was straightforward. The house and cars were all in my husband's name, and he had been making payments on them for years, so I had no claim to them. We didn't have children, so there was no child support involved. We were both working, and he even helped me secure a good job with decent pay, so there were no alimony issues either. Plus, we had signed a prenup before getting married, which I didn't mention in the main post. And of course, the fact that I cheated was a significant factor in the divorce proceedings. So in the end, my husband walked away with everything, which was rightfully his. I don't have any assets to claim, so there was nothing for me to keep. It's a harsh reality, but that's how it goes sometimes. The criticism I received during this time was intense, and I really struggled with it. I went through a period of self-hate, and while I'm still dealing with it, it's not as consuming anymore. I'm moving on from this chapter now, and I'll probably never update again after this. I know some of you won't miss me, and that's okay. I'm moving on, and I hope everyone finds peace in their own way.